America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and we're here doing the Funky Academic a little bit late today, but I'm talking to you about black voters in South Carolina. People are saying, well, low information voters. Low information. We don't know enough. All right, so that's both true and it's not true, right? So you know about things that are relevant to your life that you can affect, that the knowledge can be produced and become action. The question is, do black voters in South Carolina have power to turn that knowledge into meaning, deep political knowledge into meaning? Well, let's see. The black Democrat in South Carolina has been out of power since, well, black people have been out of power statewide since Reconstruction. So that would be a no. They don't have that kind of power. So you have to understand that when people like Bernie and to a lesser extent Warren go down to South Carolina and saying like, all right, so the government's going to secure you a good job and clean water and all of this stuff, that looks crazy to them because that presupposes that, you know, a voting majority or at least of a plurality that can be overwhelmed by black voters. So like that presumes at least 40% of white voters who are going to go along with this agenda aren't psychopaths. And that's just not going to match up with anything in black life, right? So if you work all of your life and you've watched all their parents work all of their lives, and it only works the case, and life only makes sense if white people are psychopaths, and then all of a sudden a politician who might be an anomaly comes to you and says, all right, so we can secure all of these goods on the condition that, you know, a good swath of white people are not psychopaths. You're going to say, well, that's great, but you're crazy. You have to understand, people in South Carolina look at Sanders and to a lesser extent Warren like people in the rest of the United States look at Marianne Williamson. I'll say that again. People in South Carolina, black people in South Carolina, listen to Sanders and to a lesser extent Elizabeth Warren and take them with all the seriousness with which the United States takes Marianne Williamson. So you have to understand that it's not that the South Carolina voters are low information voters. It's that they're living a different world. It's functionally, they're an inner colony within an empire. Just it's internal, an internal colony within an empire. That's what it's like to be black in South Carolina. It's an orderly empire somewhat, but you don't have self-government. And your white emperor, like imperial forces, are not on the same team, and they're psychopaths. So you say, oh, you can't call white people psychopaths. Well, look, when race is the variable, they don't feel like they have to keep any promises. They don't there's an essay I'm going to put in the description of this video by Bobby Wright, and he says they're psychopaths. I think, and my friends, you know, from South Carolina call them psychopaths, but I think they're more like sociopaths, like we produce bad people. But Bobby Wright, it's called The Psychopathic Racial Personality. I'll put the essay in the description of this video. And he pretty much argues that they're psychopaths. And if you go with him on that, a whole lot of America makes a lot more sense. Now, I think they're sociopaths. I think they're distorted families and churches and entire industries, and to a certain extent media, not to a certain extent, media, like turns them into sociopaths when race is the variable. But I think it could be fixed. We just need an intervention on the white family, on the white church, and on the white school. And I think we can make, you know, less sociopathic white people. But I think in general, they are sociopaths, and they've been taught to be sociopaths. Pete Buttigieg, sociopath. Spent his whole life learning 7 languages and how to ignore preventable racial harm in his city. It takes a lot of work to ignore racial justice claims in the United States. It takes a lot of work, but we're practiced at it. We've institutionalized this work. It's also what makes, A lot of white people are depressed or anxious, and they're depressed or anxious because they can't look too closely at their life. Because if they look too closely at their life, they'll see themselves complicit in all sorts of justice issues. So rather than look too closely at their life, they remain depressed, and they go to a doctor and get the pills and all of that. So I think that's a situation. It's not that black voters are low information voters. It's that black voters in South Carolina hear someone tell them that the policies that are going to secure them justice depend on a white electorate actually caring about securing justice, and they just think, well, no. I mean, remember, South Carolina is what happens when the Reconstruction troops get taken out. Right? There was a Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Bureau in Reconstruction, where like the Union military actually set up garrisons along the South. There's one here in Athens, Georgia, and in these garrisons, they would actually secure or try to secure the rights of black people. But in order to do that, we'd have to actually police white people, and then Americans, both white Southerners and Northern industrialists, got together and decided that they lost a taste for policing white people with respect to racial terrorism, so they just pulled all of the Freedmen's Bureau officers out, right? And pretty much surrendered black South Carolina and black Georgia and black South to the Klan, right? They abandoned black Georgia to the Klan. It's not that we ever actually went to the business of fixing South Carolina. We just took out the troops. And so, yeah, they're an inner colony surrounded by a semi-functional imperial state that treats them and uses them like an inner colony. And that's why if you tell those people that, yeah, we can organize so that we can secure you a good job, clean water, blah, 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 they'll look at you like, no. Here's another analog. For example, there's a section in Elizabeth Warren's healthcare plan that made it dependent on comprehensive immigration reform. And the idea that we could pass comprehensive immigration reform and then pass Medicare for all was just, depending on who you talk to, magical thinking. So if you make Medicare for all dependent on comprehensive immigration reform, that means to some people, rationally, I think, that you're not actually serious about Medicare for all. Right? So I want to dispel the notion that black South Carolinians are somehow distorted or irrational in their information. One, that information doesn't do anything for them because they can't actually turn that information into meaning because they don't have access to the levers of power because, depending on who you talk to, me, sociopaths, them, psychopaths, they're surrounded by white psychopaths in the quality of numbers and arms that make it the case that it's a functionally colonial state. So don't blame the South Carolinian black people for not believing Sanders. And I also get a little static because apparently Sanders canceled a rally in Jackson, Mississippi to go up and hustle for more votes and do a rally in Michigan. And some of my friends in the South were like, well, he's just abandoning black people to the South to go to Michigan. And I'm like, look, he could do all of the rallies in the world. He could do a rally in every state in Mississippi. They're still going to vote for Biden. Because you know why? They're not going to believe it till they see it. This is what Marco Rubio actually got this in the last election. He's like, people need to see government work before we do government problems, before we pitch government solutions. And I think with respect to winning primaries in the South, yeah, people need to see government work before they're going to actually believe in government solutions. The good news is the people he's talking to in Michigan, those are, great migration folks who were chased out of Mississippi. So they might actually, for, being too militant or being too, aggressive. So they might actually listen to him and understand. Plus, there's a kind of a great black labor and radical tradition in Detroit. So I hope he taps into that. Grace Lee Boggs' husband was deep into it, and Grace Lee Boggs was herself. So I hope he taps into that. But don't call them low information voters. Don't call them ignorant. There is no functional political communication structure, and that is an issue. But mostly, they are rationally cynical, right? And it's not just the black people who are rationally cynical. And let me just tell you, if you're rationally cynical, all you need from a political office is a good picture, is an aspiration. You don't actually expect policy. You just want a good picture and a photo op and maybe a little bit of patronage. But you don't actually think that the government's going to secure programmatic, that means lawful, across the entire populist policy. Because you live in a failed state. Or at least a colonial state, or a failed state surrounded by a functional state, kind of engulfed by a functional state. But what they are not is somehow stupid or irrational. What they are is appropriately cynical. Appropriately cynical. Now, the other cynical demographic in the Democratic Party, and I think that we need to talk about, is white liberals, especially women, right? Like, they don't care. They don't care. Well, they can put on the performance to caring, but how many people, and I know black people, you've been in this situation, will deal with a bunch of white liberals, especially women, but white liberals just in general. They'll be all about racial justice, all about racial justice, all about labor justice, and then when like a substantive plan comes that could actually do that, but comes with the price of somehow inconveniencing their friendships or, you know, cutting into their income, it's like hugging a ghost. It's like, you have to understand. How can I say this right? White allies treat black communities the way that Elizabeth Warren treats Bernie Sanders. I'll say that again. White allies treat black communities like Elizabeth Warren treats Bernie Sanders. It's all fun and good until you make her feel uncomfortable. And then all justice claims go out the window. Right? As opposed to white allies treating other white allies, they treat themselves like Mike Bloomberg treats Joe Biden. There might be contention, but at the end of the day, they fall in line and support the hierarchy. So I hope that was illuminating, and this will be a short video, and I hope you got enough for what you need. Share this to all your friends. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com and give me a little bit of money, because talking like this makes me down white unemployable, but I need to give the truth to my people. So go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick down for $5, $15, or $50 a month. And pass this video to all your friends, share it on your social media, and I will talk to you later. Peace.